Hey guys, it's Stephen here, back with another video. I'm going to try and dive through something today that I've been meaning to talk about, especially after the debacle, which was the Spurs game, and in general, the relatively underwhelming opening to the season, because it's been a very frustrating start to life, and last season I guess was frustrating in general. So I'm going to try and look at what's changed at City, what's going wrong, and all those kind of things, and go through loads of little talking points. Now, it's worth mentioning that none of these things are excuses, really. They're just an attempt from myself to try and work out what's going on at Manchester City at the moment. I don't really see the point in sitting there going, we're just crap, or it's just Pep's terrible. End of conversation. I mean, that doesn't really accomplish anything. You can say that if you want to, but once again, that's a very simple way of looking at life. What most people do when they're trying to work out what's not going right, what they do is draw up a list of reasons and think, well, if we sit together and talk about it, maybe we can work out what's going wrong and maybe we can fix it. So today, I'm going to go through some points that I notably picked out, basically, and try and work out if we can decide where Manchester City are falling a little flat. Now, of course, I'm not a world-class coach. I am just a fan like you guys, so my opinions aren't necessarily going to be more important than anyone else's, and I could be wrong with all this as well. I'm sure some people have very good counter-arguments, but these are just my personal takes, and I've tried to be as thorough and as fair as possible, really, when I'm going through all these points. So I'm going to start initially by saying, make sure to hit the subscribe button. I forgot to mention that if you are new to the channel, please do hit the subscribe button. It would mean loads. But I'm also going to start initially with the width, or the lack of width, I guess, in general. Now, if you think about Manchester City's great sides in the 17-18 season, the famous Centurion sides, or just City at the best under Guardiola, you no doubt think of a couple of things, but mainly you probably think about that scintillating wing play, which basically was a bit of a throwback, really, if I'm being honest. Guardiola came in and built a side during the kind of peak inverted wingers era of Messi and Robben and Ribery and all those kind of teams, even Henry at Barcelona used to cut in quite a bit, and he basically went for an old-fashioned wide pitch, and interestingly enough, Guardiola kind of agrees. Now, if we go back to the Marseille game, there's some quotes on screen right now. Guardiola was asked, and these quotes are for the Manchester Evening News, about if the width was intentional, and if you think of the Marseille game, we played Phil Foden on the left and Raheem Sterling on the right. And he said, when asked about that, it's a good view, congratulations. Against 5 at the back, you have to make the pitch high and wide. Raheem and Phil were exceptional. He also went on to say, first, we have to be wide. Is it possible when facing defending to be narrow? I'm inclined to agree, Mr. Guardiola, which makes me think, well, why are we playing so narrow? Now, I'm going to bring up now a couple of graphics here. And you can see basically where things have changed. Now, this on screen right now is when Manchester City beat Spurs 4-1 a couple of seasons back, and you can see the width here. Obviously, you look at the players on the pitch, and you can see in this instance that the players were nice and wide. 19 there, of course, was Leroy Sané, and interestingly, 47 who he came on for was Phil Foden. I want to say thank you, by the way, to RB1805 on Twitter for these graphics. I mean, he's made them himself, but as you can see, I'm borrowing them. So thank you very much, RB1805. Go and follow RB, he's a good lad. So basically, we had a left wing on the left, keeping an awful lot of width there, as you can tell. Then number 7 was Sterling over on the right, keeping an awful lot of width. And I'm pretty certain that's Bernardo as number 20 coming on as well. Obviously, that was more inverted towards the end of the game, but we had a natural width there with Aguero through the middle, and then we had Kevin De Bruyne, kind of inside Aguero and Sterling in that natural kind of false kind of 3-8 kind of pocket with so Ilkay Gundogan actually in the number 8 role, playing the more of the David Silva kind of role. Gundogan obviously not quite good as David Silva, but he was in the right position in general there. You can see the very natural width with the fullbacks as well, really, really wide, which is very much what you'd associate with Manchester City when we went forward. They were the average positions. Now, fast forward to this Spurs game, I'm going to show you this right now. Look at that. Now, I mean, I'll try and overlay them briefly so you can see the opacity difference or whatever. I'm not sure it's going to work, but you can see, actually I'll just put them side by side, but you can see the massive difference in the lack of width in general. Now, the thing immediately kind of strikes me is that, look at where Kevin De Bruyne is. Kevin De Bruyne, previously, when he would have been in that almost W shape against Spurs a couple of years back, now he's sat right alongside Gabriel Jesus. You've got Mahrez out there, but not fully wide if we're being honest. You've also got Torres kind of slightly tucked in as well, instinctively doing that an awful lot more tucked in, and Bernardo Silva kind of over there, which kind of left basically no one really in the inside right channel. Phil Foden, when he came on, kind of went over there a little bit, but that was more just for Mahrez in general, and you had no one really kind of getting out wide. Both fullbacks, Walker and Cancelo, are clearly tucked in as well, and that's a very narrow pitch. Where has that width gone? When you're trying to play a low block defensively, as Guardiola himself said, you need width to stretch the pitch. Otherwise, it becomes very easy to defend against. This is not just my opinion. These are Guardiola's words himself. So why aren't we doing it? City do lack width for the moment. If it's just a case, I'm not sure if it's just a case, by the way, of playing left-footed players on the left side or right-footed players on the right side. Sometimes you just need to make sure your players stay out wide. And if you're going to play inverted wingers, which is fine, it has worked to us to an extent before. Sterling and Mahrez, obviously, in the 18-19 season, did an awful lot of that with Bernardo as well. Just make sure, at least, then you have overlapping fullbacks. I don't know, just make sure it actually works, all the players stay wide. As it is, we're getting a very compressed system, and it's very frustrating to watch. On to the second point, I want to just talk about the tempo, really. Now, once again, that was one of the other things you thought about when we played in our best football, basically, in our best sides. You thought about that intensity. Gone are the days, basically, where you could keep the ball, where you could struggle to keep the ball against Manchester City. Do you remember all those upfield high turnovers? How many goals Manchester City created from their intensity and pressing? How we'd win the ball only 40 yards from goal, a couple of passes, and we were in behind, and we were creating a chance of scoring a goal. With pace, zest, and general, just kind of like a lust for football. That has kind of disappeared, and it's very frustrating to try and watch. Gone are those days, and I wish they were back. I mean, also, the team just looks slower in general, so we play at a slower tempo naturally. I mean, Mahrez is slower than Sterling when he was out there. Foden, Torres, they're all slower than Sane as well. So even if Torres is out there or Foden's out there, they're slightly slower. Aguero, I think, at his very best, was a little bit more kind of naturally electric than Gabriel Jesus. I like Gabriel Jesus, but over half the yard acceleration in terms of getting a shot away, I think Aguero was a little bit quicker at his very best. David Silva was definitely at his best, once again, talking about the 17-18, 18-19 campaigns, sharper than Gundogan, I would say. Bernardo Silva looks like a slower version of himself now, less sharp. And even Kevin De Bruyne is a little bit slower, I would say, after injuries. And definitely, Fernandinho was much faster than Rodri. And Ilkay, the number 6 role. So basically, we press slower. The players are a little bit slower, and we don't have the capacity at the moment to have that high tempo kind of football. I know pre-season is a big thing, a lack of pre-season. The players play an awful lot of football, but it does still feel. It felt notably slower last season as well. What I will say is that it is a relatively prescient excuse. You know, it isn't fair to say that the play is obviously very tired, and the better you are, the more games you play. So obviously, if you're Manchester City footballer, you're probably playing more international games and you're playing more European football games. So you are playing more than if you're a bottom of the half player, a Fulham player, for example. But that comes with the territory, and we have to deal with it. But I think the general mood is one of a slower Manchester City, so less width and slower in general. On to the third point, control. We don't look like we control games anymore. Do you remember the fear factor when teams used to come to us and they'd be very scared and they'd sit back as a result of our pace and in general control over the game? They would just try not to essentially give chances away. Now teams know that we're not going to keep the ball and move it anywhere near as smoothly. Think about the goal, that kind of great counter-attacking goal against Arsenal when we were away. I think it ended with Sane putting it in, or the one-touch football around. We don't see that anymore. We're not quite as good in the rondos. We're not quite as good at the one-touch football. We're not quite as good at dictating the play, moving it from side to side, waiting for that perfect opportunity. For me, that goes down once again to a lack of control in midfield mentally from the lack of Fernandinho. Once again, this is not a criticism of Rodri. It's just more that Fernandinho, in my opinion, was more wily, a little bit smarter, and also lack of control from not having David Silva there at his very best. David Silva was metronomic. David Silva was the brains, an absolute genius. And as much as Gundogan was a good player on his own, and Bernardo is a good player on his own, and Rodri is a good player on his own, and even Kevin De Bruyne, none of them have that same capacity to actually control and dictate the tempo. and the rhythm of a football match. We can't, unfortunately, recreate that at the moment, and that is a big problem. Maybe someone like Phil Foden or Bernardo Silva, if they find some form, can learn that. But at the moment, they don't have that in their armoury, and that obviously is a problem if we're going to try and play how we want to play, which is maybe something we have to reconsider. We simply can't do what we used to do in the same way possible. And fourthly, I want to just talk about just kind of confidence, really. The team just isn't confident. Maybe they're lacking a little bit of luck. Maybe those fine margins just aren't going our way. And as a result, the players, their heads are down. I think it's pretty obvious that they aren't fully happy. You know, when the chips are down, you hear the excuses, unfortunately. And this does come from Guardiola. I'm not absconding him. He obviously has to get the players motivated. It's on him entirely to get him up for it. But all I'm saying is that it looks like the players aren't confident. And when you're not confident, you miss chances. Or you kick the ball at Gabriel Jesus, who's laying on the floor from a challenge, and you hit him. Or the penalty doesn't go your way. Sorry, not the penalty. The penalty. Kevin De Bruyne misses that penalty against Liverpool. Those fine margins are absolutely huge. If Kevin De Bruyne scores that against Liverpool, that penalty, maybe City win that game, and maybe there's more confidence going to the Spurs game. If Mike Dean doesn't rule out that goal from Laporte, maybe Man City turn it around and win that game. Football does have those fine margin moments, but they are largely influenced by yourself to an extent. I do believe in general you make your own luck, but I think it's pretty obvious that the players just aren't that confident at the moment. We need to find a little bit of self-belief. Does that maybe indicate a lack of leadership in the dressing room? Does that maybe indicate a lack of authority and seniority? Because obviously the likes of Fernandinho and Aguero, their influence will now be waning. David Silva's gone, Vincent Kompany's gone. I've got no doubt so someone like Nathan Ake or Ruben Diaz could be a big leader for us at some point. But you can't come in and demand a dressing room change straight away. Regardless of how good you are or how much of a natural leader you are, you still have to win over the trust of your teammates. You still have to have shown battle scars. You know, you have to have been down there in the trenches at some point as a teammate to win their trust. And so far, Ruben Diaz hasn't had a chance to really do that. That kind of trust takes time. So currently, even though we may potentially have some captains, they haven't really earned their badges, so to speak. So are we lacking a bit of confidence? And does that come down from leadership, or maybe just a lack of motivation from Guardiola? I don't know, but I think it's pretty obvious to me that that is an issue potentially. Next, predictable. Manchester City are predictable. I think teams now know what spaces we're going to kind of work in. We're going to try and work in those half channels. We're going to try and move the balls around there, and we don't have as much natural width. So maybe, just maybe, we need to switch things up a little bit, because if we can't be who we used to be, maybe we just need to be someone different. Sure, keep the principles the same. Do move the ball around. Do create as many chances as we possibly can. You know, do try and press a little bit and have that control over the tempo of the game. But just try and mix it up a little bit. Maybe tell the players to stay really wide. Maybe encourage the players to switch their positions every now and then. Maybe try a different formation. Maybe try three at the back if it's going to help or something like that. I don't know, but we seem very, very predictable. Maybe get Kevin De Bruyne to go over towards the left every now and then or something like that. I don't know. Or maybe try a 4-4-2 with Gabriel Jesus alongside Aguero or someone like Sterling, and try an old formation where you've got 4-4-2, so you've got Phil Foden kind of playing as a left-sided midfielder. Bernardo Silva is a right-sided midfielder, a position he played for Monaco and did very well. And then you've got De Bruyne and Rodri in there. So you've got a relatively flat midfield, but one that can control the game with two forwards to occupy the width, kind of if they need to pull out to the channels. Just try something a little bit different, you know, a little bit of versatility, because City at the moment feel predictable, and as a result we feel easy to defend against. In previous days we were predictable, but we were so damn good that teams couldn't stop us anyway, which leads me on to the next point. Has our overall quality dipped a little bit? Now, I'm going to pull up two teams here next to each other side by side. And I think, in general, the teams just quite aren't as good. If we pick out what many people would say would be our best team across the 17 to 19, the 2 seasons, I think people would probably go for this forward line. They'd go for, starting on the left, Aguero, Sterling. Then he would go for David Silva, Kevin De Bruyne and Fernandinho. Now, for me, I don't think our current one is as good as that. When you look at the right wing, you've got Mahrez there, who isn't quite as good out wide as a right winger as Sterling was. That's not a dig at Mahrez. He's a very good player, but he wasn't as effective in this side, as Sterling was in that other side. Now, on the left, you've got Sterling currently. Sterling wasn't quite as good at being a left winger, in my personal opinion, as Sane was. So that's a step down. Then you've got, obviously, Gabriel Jesus, who's currently probably going to be our main striker. As much as I like Gabriel Jesus, and I genuinely do really like him, he's just not quite as sharp or quite as dangerous or quite as fearful, I guess, really. I mean, everyone's scared of Sergio Aguero at his very best. He was just more sharp, alive, capable of walloping in from extraordinary angle. Think of the goal Aguero scored against Liverpool in the 2-1 victory at the Etihad at home. That instinctive left-footed kind of half volley into the top corner, that is pure Aguero. He had that fear factor to his game, and I don't think Gabriel Jesus is quite as good as that. So far we've got wide players who aren't quite as effective. We've got a striker who isn't quite as good as either, I would argue personally. I know we've got the personnel. Sterling was part of both of those sides, but he's playing in a very different way, and thus lessens his effectiveness, I reckon. You got to remember those days where it was Sane crossing to Sterling and Sterling crossing to Sane. I miss the simplicity of it. And then you go to midfield. KDB, of course, is still there, being KDB. We've got no one as good as David Silva at what David Silva did. Gundogan, Rodri, they can't do it. Phil Foden can't quite do it. He's very different, but we've got no one who can do it to the level that David Silva did. No one, literally no one. He, at his very best, was the best midfielder in terms of dictating rhythm in the league. Alongside him, of course, we had Kevin De Bruyne, who was the best in terms of final ball and moments of magic. So we had the perfect balance: control, rhythm, precision. And then the artist on the other side, you know, just with moments of absolute magic. Now we've just got like a runner alongside him usually, or someone whose instincts are more like Kevin De Bruyne, like Phil Foden and Bernardo. Their instincts are more direct in the way that Kevin De Bruyne's are. So we lost that. And then we go to the base of midfield. And as much as once again I thought Rodri was fine against Spurs, is he Fernandinho at his very best? He's just not as good. I'm sorry, he's not as good. Could he be maybe one day? Possibly. But currently, and I'm talking about currently, Fernandinho was a cut above Rodri at his best. Fernandinho was a bastard. Fernandinho was everywhere. Fernandinho would have been all over Harry Kane in the Spurs game like a rash, and he would have read those passing channels, and he probably would have brought it up to Guardiola himself. Should I sit deep on Kane? Because Kane is the one who drops into midfield and creates these chances, and I believe he would have done that, and it would have been a different kettle of fish altogether. Defensive, I haven't gone near the defence because I don't really see the point. Because it's the front six that bugs me these days. It's not quite as good, so we need to change that. Anyway. Lots of ranting there. I do think Manchester City will be back. We will be back to our best at some point. We will change the team. But I wanted to look about where it's going wrong. As ever with these things, there's loads of little variables. Football isn't as simple as one little problem. It could be poor recruitment. It could be players getting a bit older. It could be a manager lacking a bit of confidence. It could be a player's injured. It's always 1,010,000,000 different little factors that come together to complete the whole picture. And hopefully I pulled out some of those factors there. I'm sure there are a few things as well that I haven't mentioned. Guardiola, he needs to find that inner drive again. He needs to maybe trust in youth a little bit more. He needs to be a little bit bolder, take more risks, stop being pragmatic, stop being scared of other teams, I guess. Go for it, get a bit of arrogance and get fucking tough with those players. They need a kick up the arse sometimes. It could be loads of little things. Hopefully, anyway, as I've just said, I picked out some of them. Guys, if you enjoyed this video, do let me know down in the comments what your take is from this, and make sure to hit the subscribe button and give this video a like. It's been fun talking about this, getting it all off my chest. I will see you tomorrow, of course, for a match preview. I might even be live later on today as well. For now, though, football in a bit.